Hey, everyone. Welcome to a Tuesday Talk with Hannah. I'm Hannah Levin from Heartfelt Wellbeing, and I do these talks from time to time to share a bit of wisdom from the ancient art of Ayurveda combined with our modern science understanding of our health so that we can proceed in our lives with the most knowledge and support that we can. And so today I wanted to talk about chronic inflammation. And so inflammation is something that can show up in our bodies in lots of different ways. And I'm going to dive into a bunch of things today. This is not going to be an exhaustive sharing since I only have a half an hour. I could probably talk for many hours on the topic of inflammation, but I do want to give you some supportive tools and a framework within which to understand inflammation so that you can begin to see it more clearly in yourself and in other people around you, in your loved ones. Yeah, Laura just wrote in, this is such an important and confusing topic. It's so true. And that's why I want to at least begin the conversation here in this community. So we just wrapped up our spring detox here in the Heartfelt Wellbeing community. And a big part of what we focus on in a detox is decreasing slash eliminating, if we can, inflammation that we're experiencing in our bodies so that it doesn't become chronic. We don't continue to carry it within our bodies for seasons and years and decades to come. So today I'm going to give you an overview kind of Western perspective and an Ayurvedic perspective and some tools. So let's dive in, shall we? So today I'm addressing chronic inflammation, which is different from acute inflammation. And I just want to draw that distinction from the get-go here, that acute inflammation is something that happens from something like a direct trauma to the body, like a cut or something falls on you, tissue damage from a direct trauma, or microbial invasion. Um, Things like that create a short-term severe inflammation. So we have all experienced inflammation from that perspective. What I want to talk about today is chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is referred to, and I have this pulled up, so I'm looking down at this definition. It's a slow, long-term inflammation lasting for prolonged periods of several months or years. The extent and effects of chronic inflammation vary with the cause of how it got started and the ability of the body to repair and overcome the damage. And that is the key piece, the ability of the body to repair and overcome the damage. And that's where a system like Ayurveda can really shine because Ayurveda gives us these tools and ways of being through diet and lifestyle and even herbal medicine practices that can help us alleviate, overcome, and repair the damage that has been done by inflammation. So let's look at symptoms of inflammation. So you can start thinking about, like, is this something that you might be struggling with, chronic inflammation? So some general symptoms are brain fog, having trouble connecting thoughts or remembering things, or just feeling like you're kind of swimming through molasses a lot of the time, like hoping that you didn't forget something and that things come together. Lethargy is another sign where you just don't feel very motivated or energized. Your body feels generally heavy. Weight gain can also come from chronic inflammation, where your body just seems to put on weight no matter what you do. And this is very frustrating if you're wanting to lose weight. Even if you start eating less food, you might find that you're still gaining weight or not able to lose weight. And this is from chronic inflammation most often. Joint pain is another sign of chronic inflammation, which can be tied to weight gain as well. So if your joints are having to bear more weight, that is definitely a thing. But also, the joints themselves can become a site for the inflammation. And I'll talk about that from an Ayurvedic perspective in just a little bit. Digestive issues, so that can run the gamut of gas, bloating, acid reflux, pain, and then also elimination, so constipation, or the opposite of diarrhea, loose stools, um, and pain, burning, and itching with bowel movements can also be a sign of inflammation. And IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is a diagnosis, a title given to the behavior of kind of swinging back and forth between constipation and diarrhea. And this is definitely tied into inflammation. Sleep issues, so either having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, getting poor sleep, not feeling rested when you wake up, can definitely be tied into inflammation. Not feeling yourself is another thing that we could say identifies inflammation, where we just feel like we're not quite functioning in the world as we'd like to be, or we know ourselves to be a certain way and we surprise ourselves for not showing up in that way in our lives. But this is something I hear a lot. It's like somebody just says, I just kind of feel like I'm not myself right now. Um, and that can be lots of different factors, but inflammation can be one of them. And then another thing is getting a diagnosis, right? So if you go to a doctor and they give you a diagnosis, the diagnosis is not going to be inflammation, okay? Because that is not a recognized diagnosis, just general inflammation. You will be diagnosed with something else. So some things that you may get diagnosed with that stem from inflammation are things like autoimmune diseases, chronic fatigue, any sort of cardiovascular disease, cancer, kidney disease, autoimmune neurodegenerative disorders. So this is like progressed disease states at this point if you get diagnosed with any of those things. But we could also get diagnosed with like fibromyalgia is an autoimmune disease, which basically is unexplained pain in the body. So fibromyalgia kind of covers a large gamut. Now, we do know from modern research that probably 90 to 95% of modern disease originates from inflammation. And this is why I am talking about it so passionately and hoping to help spread the word that it's really key that we manage our own tolerance for and willingness to engage with inflammation in our lives. Um, that we're not just waiting for a diagnosis of something. Like Kayla just wrote in and she said, yes, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease last year, and my endocrinologist never mentioned the word inflammation. Right. So this is not really a Western understanding of disease states. And disease, if we look at dis-ease, right? Like we're out of the state of ease is when we're in a disease state. So again, 90 to 95% of disease states originate from inflammation. This gives us cause to pay attention to inflammation. Now, we can give the disease states, especially once they progress, lots of different names. And that's probably like Kayla, you have been diagnosed with a disease like Graves' disease. There you go, right? And you may have been told it's from hormonal imbalance, or, your thyroid not working correctly, or, lots of different things. What is behind all of that is unmanaged inflammation in the body. So what I want to do now is to talk about how Ayurveda understands this this concept and the progression of disease in the body. So, from an Ayurvedic perspective, there's something called samprapti, and samprapti is the pathogenesis of disease. So, like how it starts and then grows and manifests in your body. So, the basic understanding of samprapti is that it goes through several stages, and we can imagine it like a faucet that has a bucket underneath it. And when everything is working perfectly, wonderfully in our bodies, we can successfully turn on the faucet when we need to, and then turn off the faucet when we need to. And the faucet can be the flow um, of the body functioning well. So, for instance, if there is a need, if inflammation comes in, the faucet gets turned on, and the the inflammation gets washed out. It gets healed, dealt with, and washed out. The faucet turns off. Okay. When we start entering imbalanced states, this is like a faucet that can't get turned off totally. So there is a drip that starts, and the drip starts to fall into this bucket. Okay. And the bucket is like our capacity to hold um, hold and manage imbalances in the body. Okay. So the faucet begins to drip into the bucket. And for a while we're still kind of fine. The bucket's slowly filling up. We might have a few symptoms here and there. Maybe we're having some digestive distress, or some headaches, or something like that. Now, from the Ayurvedic understanding, dosha, so hopefully we're all familiar here with Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, the doshas or energies that Ayurveda works with, comprised of different combinations of the five elements. Dosha originates, the seat of dosha is in the gut. Okay, and this is something that we can translate into Western medicine, is recently discovering that our immunity and a lot of our neuro transmitters and all these things that we need are, originate in the gut. So our microbiome is really important, as is the healthy function of the gut lining. So the gut lining is healthy and strong, but it's actually really, really thin in reality. And the stomach is the seat of kapha, small intestines is the seat of pitta, and the large intestine and colon is the seat of vata. So, from the Ayurvedic perspective, if we keep everything in great working order in the gut, everything else in the body does really well. So, this is why we focus a lot on healing the gut in Ayurveda. And a lot of people, when they first come to Ayurveda, they're like, oh, yeah, it's all about food, right? It's all about food. And that's a great place to start. Ayurveda is not, however, all about food, but we want to look at healing the gut and having a really healthy gut. So back to our samprapti. When we have this bucket that the drip is filling up slowly, the bucket, we may start to notice some imbalance in our gut. Now, some of us have had imbalance in our guts for forever, like since we've been able to notice. And we think certain things are normal, like gas, bloating, acid reflux, any sort of pain, or not having bowel movements every single day, or relying on other substances like caffeine to give us a bowel movement, or that we have crazy diarrhea all the time. We're just like, that's how I am. Once that bucket fills up with that slow leak, and it overflows, this is when a disease state manifests in the body. Now, from an Ayurvedic languaging perspective, this is when the dosha leaves the digestive tract site and lodges in what we call a kava gunya. And a kava gunya is a place of weakness in the body. So this might be a joint that has had an injury, like you fell on your knee or you twisted your elbow and there's a weakness there. It might be your lungs because you had pneumonia at some point and there's a lot of scar tissue there. So weaknesses are set up in our bodies as we live our lives. They don't have to be a big issue if we take good care of them and ourselves, but we often have weaknesses that we don't attend to. We sprained an ankle, we, did certain things, we had food poisoning and whatever, never rebuilt the gut biome. So when that overflow happens in the bucket, from the bucket, now the disease state goes to a weak part in the body. This is where you might notice that you have joint pain, or you show up at the doctor and they give you a diagnosis. Okay, this is where you will be diagnosed. What Ayurveda understands is that there's a whole lot that's happening upstream or up faucet from that experience of having a disease state manifest in your body. If we look at the gut lining, there are so many things that compromise our gut lining and lead to what we call leaky gut. Okay. Leaky gut is where the gut lining is compromised. So things that should be staying in the gut leak out, and they leak out into the body. And again, this is going to create inflammation because things are not where they should be in the body. And this is really the basic underlying piece of chronic inflammation, is that things are not where they should be in the body. So we have chronic inflammation from leaky gut. This is true for so many of us. So what creates leaky gut? Any sort of foods that are treated with antibiotics or glyphosate, Roundup. This is why it's really important to eat organic, local, non-GMO. If you have taken antibiotics, if you take any prescription proton pump inhibitors or SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, all of these, basically, from what I can tell from my research, most prescription drugs that I am aware of are gut disruptors. So we're basically putting something in our system to solve some problem, and it's creating more gut disruption that then down the road is going to snowball into larger manifestations of disease. And I've certainly seen people that are on, the snowball has gone so far that there's not as much hope of fully backing up or like melting the snowball, right? Um, that the disease states are so complicated and piled on top of different conflicting medications. And this is where things get really complicated when we're given drugs by psychiatrist and, a rheumatologist and uh, um, internist. And, so we're taking drugs for lots of things, but maybe there's nobody overseeing how they're all interacting. And Western medicine doesn't seem to really acknowledge the gut disruption piece from all of these medications. Those of you that are on medications, I doubt your doctor said, this will help with your acid reflux, but it's also going to compromise your gut lining, which is going to lead to leaky gut. I really doubt that any of them have said that to you. So when we experience inflammation, it means that something is out of place in the body and the body's trying its best. Our sweet little bodies, our sweet, sweet bodies, they are trying so hard to regain balance. And sometimes there's not enough support. We think we're doing the best we can, but there's not enough support. And so then that's when we enter into something like an autoimmune disease or cancer proliferation, where the body then can't recognize itself. It can't distinguish the cancer cell from the healthy cell, and it can't distinguish which cells need to be attacked to be cleared out from healthy cells, which is autoimmune, where our bodies attack themselves. So how do we get so confused in our cellular intelligence? And this is what is my my question around inflammation is like, how do we find the way to have the inner conversation that's not in English, right? But how do we have the inner conversation with our cellular intelligence to create healthy gut biome that then allows us to keep inflammation um, isolated, so that when there are inflammatory things that happen in the body can clear it out, no problem. Inflammation is a part of life, and there is good inflammation that can happen. Like if we do a hard workout at the gym, our muscles are going to go into a bit of an inflammatory response, and that's not bad inflammation. It's a period of time, and then it will clear out from the body. So yeah, Kayla just wrote and didn't have adequate birth recoveries. It's so terrible in America. And I would say I am so sorry that that is part of your story, Kayla. And it is so true that it's part of so many women's stories, that our society expects us to be pregnant, give birth, and then get back to life as we knew it. And that is the most ridiculous thing. And what I have seen, most of my clients are older than me. And one of the things that I have seen over and over and over again is that a lot of their health issues, from hypothyroidism to autoimmune diseases, all sorts of things, I believe originated from inadequate postpartum recovery, in that giving birth is like the most vata deranging thing that can happen to your body. You're in a kapha state, you have this growth. Actually, you have a couple growths. You have a baby that has grown inside you, and then you also have the placenta, which is like growing a whole nother organ. Pretty amazing that your body can do that. Plus, you're holding a ton of other liquids, right? More blood, amniotic fluid. All of these things leave you in a very kapha state. So you're very heavy, earth, right? Earth element there, water element. And then within a relatively short period of time, you release the placenta and the baby and a bunch of the liquid. And that is a lot of movement, a big change to have happen in your body in a short period of time. And then we're expected to just get up and go. And a lot of women push themselves too hard during this time, and it creates chronic vata imbalance, which can look lots of different ways depending on where those kava gunyas are in the body. For a lot of women, it shows up in thyroid and digestive issues, um, weight gain. Yeah. And you might say, vata is not heavy, right? How does weight gain happen from a vata state? But it does, because it's a balance to the vata imbalance. So thank you for sharing that, Kayla. Yeah, and I went on a little tangent there. So in the last little bit that we have here, let's dive into, I hope you all aren't horribly depressed, right? Let's look at some of the things that um, are causing, some more things that are causing inflammation in our bodies potentially, and then things we can do to help clear inflammation in our bodies. So we'll end on a hopeful note. We are not stuck with inflammation. So I did want to touch on inflammatory foods. And these are things that we took a break from in the detox, are in general. So this is, just general things that could be inflammatory to you. Gluten is one of the main inflammatory foods right now that people are reacting to. And I think that is in large part to a lot of glyphosate or Roundup being in the soil and the water. And glyphosate is a known gut disruptor. So a lot of people may think they're allergic to wheat or gluten specifically, which is in other grains like barley and rye and spelt, but they're actually reacting to the glyphosate. And we can't really know where that is coming in. But taking a break from glutinous grains can be really helpful. Dairy is another one. And again, dairy in general, if it's mass produced and it's full of antibiotics from what the cows have been fed, then and all sorts of there is also going to be full of glyphosate because of the grains that the cows are eating. So again, is it the actual dairy or lactose or the contaminants that are in there? So if you are having dairy, making sure that you're eating really, really clean, antibiotic free, local, organic, all of those things. But dairy in general can be very inflammatory. And it is strange that we are a culture that drinks and eats another animal's milk year round. Now, there are cultures in the world where that is what people survive off of, but we, most of us, were not, our ancestors weren't originated in cultures like that. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But so dairy can be very inflammatory. Corn, again, very contaminated crop. Soy is another one. Soy can also be estrogen mimic, so that can cause other issues if you have an estrogenic sensitivity. Sugar, especially refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup, really refined sugars basically act like crack in your system. They're addictive and they cause a lot of imbalance and inflammation. So I have seen so many clients get off of sugar and notice a huge reduction in inflammatory response in their bodies, from reduction in joint pain to easeful weight loss to better sleep, reduction of hot flashes, like so many things. It's pretty amazing. So alcohol is another culprit. Same thing, it's basically sugar. And a lot of us think that it's healthy, but it creates an inflammatory response in the body. So does caffeine. Um, Peanuts are another thing that create an inflammatory response in a lot of people, and you might not even know it. I mean, you might be eating or drinking a lot of these things and be like, well, I'm fine, but you won't know until you totally cut them out for 3 weeks or so and see how you feel. You might be really surprised. Peanuts often carry lots of molds on them, and can tend to be rancid as well. So peanuts are not such a good idea. Nightshades can affect some folks too. So those are tomatoes, white potatoes, peppers, and eggplant. And those can be inflammatory to some people. They tend to affect more people who are pitta predominant, who have digestive imbalance. Hydrogenated oils, trans fats. Now, again, this is just processing something that only works in our body in its whole form, and we're processing it, and it's basically really bad for us. And then any additives or chemicals, preservatives, things like that in food, those create inflammation in our bodies as well. Fun times, y'all. So, additionally, we can be affected by um, environmental toxins. So things that are sprayed on our lawns, or factories that we're living near that are pumping pollutants into the air. Will also be affected by convenience foods. So things that are in packages should go away from your life, okay? And poor diet in general, so not having enough fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, a whole food diet, basically plant-based. Vegetables clear out toxins, inflammatory ingredients in our bodies. So we want to eat mostly vegetables, mostly plants. They are really good at clearing out our systems. So what else are factors in creating inflammation in our lifestyle? Inadequate healing sleep. So if we're not sleeping enough or sleeping at the right times, and those of you who know the Doshic clock, you know there are better times to sleep than other times. And we want to get the best healing sleep. So we want to go to bed before 10 p.m. And if we're not, we are setting ourselves up for inflammation. And we want to sleep ideally 8 to 9 hours. Now that's a far cry from what most people get. Most people are staying up later. So we set ourselves up through poor sleep hygiene and not prioritizing sleep. And sleep is really when our body can heal. Infections, if we aren't treating infections, maybe we have some like low grade infections that we just live with. So that sets up inflammatory responses in the body that can be ongoing. Lack of physical activity, we have to move our bodies in order to move things out of our systems and to allow rejuvenation and regeneration of cells to happen. So we need exercise. So lack of physical exercise is another contributing factor. And then environmental toxins. And then the biggest lifestyle factor for inflammation is stress. So when we're in a stress response, our body creates cortisol. And cortisol sets everything in our body on hyper alert and says, hold on, a lot is happening. Be really careful. And it creates confusion in our cellular intelligence. So much cortisol. Think about even how you breathe when you're in a stressed out state, right? You contract and your shoulders probably come up close to your ears and you're not breathing and you're not moving, right? So the ability to train your nervous system away from the cortisol response, which is fight, flight, freeze, or collapse. Those four responses are where a lot of us exist. We are in a hypervigilant nervous system state constantly. And this is another fallout from not recovering well from postpartum for a lot of women. Having tiny babies, working jobs, over exercising, and all at once, their systems can't handle it. In Ayurveda, after you have a baby, you spend 40 days in bed being oiled. Your baby's oiled, your body's oiled, the community brings you food, and you get to rest. How many of us get to do that in our culture? If you know a mama who's about to give birth, please help this happen in her life, at least for a couple days, right? To rest, to have her body oiled, to eat nourishing food that's easy to digest, not salad, not lasagna, right? Like one pot nourishing coconut milk vegetable stew, something like that. Okay, so when we're in that cortisol response, we're creating inflammation. We're feeding the inflammation in our bodies. What we want to do is train our nervous systems into more of this rest and digest response, which is the production of the cuddle hormone, which is oxytocin. So when we're like, yay, life is good, I can breathe a deep breath and as many deep breaths as I want to. I am connected and supported and nourished. Where does this come from? It comes from many of the things that I just mentioned: adequate or amazing, nourishing diet, supportive sleep, exercise, meaningful relationships. So we are social beings and we need connection to each other in meaningful ways. And then the last piece is meditation. In meditation, we can train our nervous systems to shift state. And this is so important, so important. So meditation is medicine when we come down to it. So I think I have just shared a whole lot. I've even gone past my half hour here talking about inflammation. I hope that you all learned a lot. Feel free to ask more questions in the chat. Feel free to um, share what you learned with me from what I shared today. And I want to encourage all of you to join my One Habit to Thrive challenge that's starting on the 27th of April, where we will go into a lot more specifics in how to live in alignment with the season. So really, we want to, I said we want to eat well, right? So eating well means eating in alignment with the season, seasonally aligned diet, but also eating in alignment with our dosha, our constitution, and our imbalances so that we can heal. So, connecting with nature is the name of the game here. It's medicine, and if we can take our cues from the natural world, we're gonna be okay. We'll all be okay. So I look forward to sharing more with you in the One Habit to Thrive Challenge. I'm going to be teaching for 45 minutes each day, April 27th through May 3rd. It's totally free. Please invite all your friends. I'm going to start giving away prizes tomorrow for the next week for you sharing about the One Habit to Thrive Challenge. And there's nothing to lose. Like, sign up, tune in, and you're going to gain a whole lot of applicable skills and amazing knowledge to help you thrive in being healthy and happy naturally without drugs and procedures. So, thanks for being here today, and I'll see you all again very soon. Take care.